Welcome to another edition of Broad Mind, where we explore the minds of writers, authors, and beyond. I am your host, T.L. Rotkowitz, and today's guest is John-Manuel Andriote. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you.
John's love of the old farms, stone walls, and beautiful country roads in the boondocks of eastern Connecticut made Wilhelmina's story jump off the newspaper page and grab his interest. As a longtime journalist, he knew this was a special story waiting to be retold. John built his journalism career over 22 years in Washington, D.C., after earning a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University in 1986. Back home in Connecticut, he tends a large vegetable garden and a community garden located in the backyard of Samuel Huntington, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Fascinating. A student of American history, the setting feeds John's body and soul as it revels in the history of the place. It also fuels his nickname of Farmer John. That's an interesting one. Although Wilhelmina Goes Wandering is his first children's book, John is the author of several other books that reflect his diverse interests. His award-winning Victory Deferred chronicles how the AIDS epidemic in America transformed lives and institutions. On a lighter note, Hot Stuff, A Brief History of Disco Dance Music, is a serious look at a fun subject. I bet it is. John's newest book was published by Rowman and Littlefield in October of 2017, Stonewall Strong, Gay Men's Heroic Fight for Resilience, Good Health, and a Strong Community, draws upon John's personal story, nearly 100 original interviews, and leading-edge research. John writes a blog about building resilience, also called Stonewall Strong, for Psychology Today. His work has been published since the early 1980s in print and web outlets ranging from The Atlantic to the Washington Post. Thank you for being on the show, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I like to start out by asking you, how'd you get into writing?
Well, I got into writing basically at the encouragement of one of my professors from college, who was an English professor and was a very admired and well-liked professor, very erudite. I used to go back from his classes with a list of vocabulary words that I would look up and then try to incorporate into my own vocabulary. And so after I finished college, he and I struck up a correspondence. And at one point, he said to me in a letter, whatever else you do in life, don't neglect your ability to write beautifully. And so I took that to heart. And while I was looking around for what I wanted to do with my life, what I wanted to be, it seemed that finding a way to make a living doing something that I was good at and that I enjoyed made a lot of sense. So that's how it all started.
Wow. So nothing about like in your childhood that you started picking up on writing, or?
No, you know, it's funny. I was given my first typewriter, a little children's English-made manual typewriter for my 10th birthday, or actually Christmas of 1968. I have a picture of me with this little typewriter. So that was maybe an early sign that I was meant to become a writer, but I don't remember having a sense as a young kid or a teenager of being kind of compelled to be a writer.
Well, for me it was third grade. I got inspired by watching TV and playing with toys. The thing was to use your imagination. And in third grade we had those composition books, the black and white ones that you always get. And they would always ask us to write, what we did for just the day or whatever. And my teacher was so blown away by how I wrote. I was like, okay.
Wow.
But children's books were always a big part of me growing up. And my grandparents definitely got after me to go to the library. And it was a lot of fun doing that. But I haven't been compelled to write a children's book yet. And I'm wondering, how hard is the process in doing so?
Well, writing Wilhelmina Goes Wandering was my first children's book, and it seemed natural to me as a journalist to sort of take the facts of the story as it was developing over the 5 months that the real Wilhelmina, the actual cow in Milford and Orange, Connecticut, who ran away from the farm in Orange, and for 5 months she was seen around the area traveling with her herd of deer. That's a true story.
Oh, so it is a true. Wow.
Absolutely, and it was
how
in
cool.
the
Oh, I see.
newspapers.
It says
and
right here, based on a true story.
Connecticut TV stations.
Oh,
Huffington
wow.
Post had it in the News of the Weird, or Weird News. And yeah, it was quite a little media sensation in 2011 when the real Wilhelmina, kind of amused the townfolk in Milford by evading the capture, by the animal control people. So over those months, there would be periodically accounts in the newspaper in Norwich, Connecticut, where I live. And after a while, I started clipping these because I thought, this is really an interesting story. And how is it that this cow and a herd of deer understood each other and felt comfortable with one another?
Yeah.
And obviously, they were able to communicate with each other. And so I, followed the adventures of Wilhelmina, and then I put it together in, writing the story that I intended for kids, but it has, in the 5 years since we self-published the book, it has been as appealing to adults as to kids. So I actually call it a fable for kids ages 5 to 105.
Yeah. Well, so I was going to say, we've had guests on before, and I've constantly heard people say that animals don't have feelings or whatever, but something like this proves it. Sometimes, like the previous guest we had on, I asked him if it was more of a spiritual journey for what he went through with a pet and rescuing, basically, and stuff like that. But we discount them so much. We think of cows as steak dinner and different things like that. But we don't really consider how much that they feel, and they can depend on other creatures too. Like you're saying, the deer. It's like, wow, they talk to each other.
Absolutely. I believe that. I
That's
mean, just because we don't understand their language doesn't mean they're not speaking it and communicating and understanding each other. We were speaking before we went on air about how odd it is that, given all of the sort of animated animal heroes in America and all the Disney characters, I can't think of a cow hero, as much as people love cows beyond just being steaks and milk. But they love, the gentleness and the innocence that they, sort of suggest. But there's never been a cow hero. And I think Wilhelmina is born for that role.
Definitely. They're like sentient creatures too. But that's fascinating. Did you have a hard time trying to publish this?
No, because we independently published it. So I didn't have to find an agent and shop it to publishers. I mean, the first challenge was finding an illustrator. And I found Katie Rundy, who's an amazing illustrator.
I would say gorgeous work.
Oh, she's an amazing artist. She actually grew up in Hartford. And her mother, Nan Rundy, is also like an incredible artist, painter, sketcher. And Katie completely takes after her mom. And this was actually the first book that Katie had illustrated. And so all of the color illustrations are original watercolors. Each one is an original painting that she made for the book. And so I found Katie I put a notice on the Facebook page of the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association that I was looking for an illustrator who would be willing to do the work basically gratis as an investment in this project. And that, hopefully we would sell a lot of copies and we might make some money. But the main thing was, you had to love the story
Yeah.
and be willing to make that commitment. And so through word of mouth and shared messages on Facebook, I was introduced to Katie. And as soon as I saw her previous work, I just knew she was absolutely the person who could bring these characters to
Yeah.
life. And she did.
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful work. I want to ask you, like, when you come up with a children's book or whatever, you have to figure out what's important to the story, right?
Mhm.
So you have less pages than, say, a novel, you know,
Mhm.
regular adult thing. So it's a little trickier.
Yeah, you really do have to boil it down and make it very simple. And I think that maybe part of my background for writing that way was that throughout my writing career, starting in the early 80s, I've always sort of written poetry
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah.
I always describe it as kind of practice writing, where I get to sort of play around with words and the rhythm and cadence of sentences.
Yeah.
You really become attuned to the music of language, and so it's the same reason I like writing tweets on Twitter.
Yeah.
Is it's a challenge to kind of boil it down, what you want to say, into 280 characters
Oh,
on
that's true,
Twitter.
yeah.
And in this book, yeah, it's a very low number of words compared to Stonewall Strong
Yeah.
or other longer adult books.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, you have to limit yourself. Like, I write freelance for, like, local paper and stuff. So even 600 words, like, I went overboard, and then your boss tells you,
Yeah.
we got to edit. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
But that happens, too.
Mhm.
Can you talk about, like, what the age span is for such a book? Did you intend for it to be for children?
I did. And I think it was, I mean, the original intended age group was 5 to 9. That was the age that teachers and librarians told me this seems most appropriate for them.
Yeah.
But the first time that I read it at Calf-Pen Meadow School in Milford, which is actually featured in the book,
Yeah.
and the librarian there, Mary Ellen Minicello, who has since retired, she was quoted as saying, I think the New Haven Register was there because they had this whole ceremony to induct me as the school's favorite author, and
Nice.
their mascot is a cow.
Oh,
And so, and the
sweet.
real Wilhelmina,
Yeah.
that's the area of Milford that she was seen, was around Calf-Pen Meadow, where the school is. And so Mary Ellen said, I can't believe this is John's first children's book because he explores themes that most people don't consider children's themes.
Yeah.
Like fitting in and being different and being self-conscious of being different, and what it means to sort of blossom once you feel accepted and loved.
Yeah.
And she said, but little kids relate to that,
Yeah.
and so do adults.
Yeah.
It's a real grown-up theme.
Well, I wanted to ask you, like you were saying before the show, you were saying that the age, what was it? You said
I describe it as a fable for kids 5 to 105.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I call it a fable because, since Aesop's fables
Yeah.
from ancient Greece, talking animals,
Yeah.
have frequently been used in stories to make very important points that, and to impart lessons and morals of the story, because hearing it from a cow,
Yeah.
is not as threatening, or, it doesn't have the baggage as it would coming from another person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a little easier thing to swallow, so so to say. I wanted to ask you, since you were saying about 5 to like 105 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that like children's books are good for like even seniors, like senior centers? A lot of people don't think of it, and I just thought of it right now because of the age span you were talking about. But you know, like to grasp concepts that they've lost from back then, you know, compared to what we can easily digest with regular novels and 400 pages and stuff like that.
Well, I'm not a gerontologist.
No, you don't have to be.
But I would say I think children's books, are appropriate for anyone.
Yeah.
Really, for
Universal.
adults. And the Wilhelmina Goes Wandering is often compared to books like The Giving Tree and the Velveteen Rabbit, you know, and these books that are for children, but they have very grown-up themes.
Yeah.
That's why from the time that we published Wilhelmina, I developed a tagline for it, because my goal always was to see the book turn into an animated film, and for Wilhelmina really to become, a hero. But the tagline that I used on the poster that Katie created for the book, sort of like a movie poster, was sometimes we have to leave our familiar pasture to find our true home. And that's
like
a
that.
really grown-up thing,
Yeah.
And certainly everyone who grows up in a small town and feels out of place, and they move to a big city, or they make changes in their lives to find a place where they feel at home.
Yeah.
That's a very human experience.
Yeah.
And so I framed that story through the eyes of a cow.
That is so cool. That really is great, I gotta tell you. I wish you so much success on this. That's
Well,
tremendous.
Thank you. I think Wilhelmina still has bigger pastures to
roam around in?
to roam around. I've actually written 3 other stories, a prequel and 2 sequels.
Oh, you are?
That
Okay.
that I'm calling, that will be part of a Betty's Farm series. So Betty's Farm is the home, the adopted home that Wilhelmina goes to at the end of the story. And the real Wilhelmina actually was taken and relocated to an animal sanctuary, a farm in Oxford. And so that's in the book.
Yeah.
That Betty's Farm is in Oxford. So I sort of imagined what Wilhelmina's forever home might look like.
Wow. That is great, really. That you have an absolutely beautiful soul to do something like that.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
And one more question I wanted to ask you regarding this book is, do you ever have like certain, I don't know how I want to say this, not premonitions, but do you ever have certain signs that tell you that you're going in the right direction of writing something like this? Like you were saying, the school was telling you that, people don't usually think of certain things, or they just came upon you, just like as a gift, or what do you think?
Well, I guess my answer to that would be that Wilhelmina Goes Wandering comes from the same soul and the same heart and mind and values and way of thinking about life and spirituality as the nonfiction books that I've written. My sense of calling as a journalist, and journalist specializing in health and medicine, is the thing that has propelled most of my career. And a lot of my work, especially focused on LGBTQ issues, really is coming from a place of being very passionate about justice and equality, for all people. And so you take that value system and apply that to a story about a cow and a herd of deer, and what you come up with. And I hadn't necessarily thought about this until librarians started saying to me that your book, Wilhelmina Goes Wandering, just gave us a great way of talking about diversity with one of our parent groups. And that's when I said, aha, you know, I really hit on something here. People really see that this is a story about a cow who, in the story, my imaginary Wilhelmina, is a free spirit, an adventurer. That's why she runs away, you know, when Daisy the doe says to her, you know, why do you look so depressed? You know, if you held your head up, you'd look like the free spirit you really are. And that's when Wilhelmina says, somebody recognizes me, someone sees me for who I am, who I see myself. And she runs away with the deer. And for the first time, she feels accepted as a free spirit. She can be herself. And then when she goes to live at Betty's farm, she and Betty look in each other's eyes and they recognize a kindred free spirit. And then we learn that that's Betty's story too, is that she's an old woman now, but as a young girl, she ran away from home too, back in Scotland, you know. And where the Angus breed originated. That's why that's in there, in the Highlands. And so, you know, at the very end of the story, Wilhelmina looks at the open gate in her pasture, that Betty has never closed the gate. And she realizes, wow, I really don't want to run away this time because now I'm accepted and loved. This is where I belong. And, you know, and the change in her is so profound, and it's because she's now able to accept and love herself because she's finally been, you know, accepted. So, and that's a real human story.
So it's based, in a nutshell, it's based on values and what you value, and that's how you're able to present a story like this.
Yeah, I mean, when I've read the story to second graders and fifth graders, you know, after I read them the story, I'll ask questions like, how many of you have ever felt different for something because you wear glasses, or you have braces, or you have dark skin, or you have light skin, or red hair? You know, everybody feels different, and adults the same way. We're all different in some way. And that's what makes being human wonderful. That's what makes our country great at its best, is our diversity. But when we attach a negative meaning to that difference, and you say that being black, being gay, being red-headed, wearing glasses is bad or wrong, or, you know, and we stigmatize that, then we have problems. But when we learn to celebrate our differences and celebrate our own difference, then, you know, then we will succeed in Wilhelmina's mission.
Like I said, I think that's fabulous, and it teaches me a lesson too, because, you know, what I write, it is about what I value, and just happens to go along with it, and then I wonder, how did I write that? Oh, you're right, it comes from the body and soul, the same one. So that's something. I want to touch on it if we have enough time, hopefully.
Sure.
This one, Stonewall Strong, Gay Men's Heroic Fight for Resilience, Good Health, and a Strong Community. How did you decide to come up with this one?
Well, I decided back around 2011 that I wanted to write a book about resilience, gay men's resilience in particular. And it was a subject that was on my mind because I've had good reason to think about my own resilience and the reasons why I became, you know, such a resilient man, looking back over my life. And so at first I thought I was going to collaborate on it with a psychiatrist I know in New York, Dr. Bob Kurtzner at Columbia University. But then he said he thought I should do the book on my own as a journalist. And so that's what I wound up doing. And it was a long gestating project because it wasn't published until October 2017. The paperback edition just came out in May of 2019.
Oh,
But my first articles on resilience were for Huffington Post when I was blogging for HuffPost from 2011 to about 2017, 2018. And then I was writing for The Atlantic, and I wrote a story called The Power of Choosing Resilience in the spring of 2013. And it was sort of a compressed version of the themes that I wanted to explore more in depth in the book. And so it was a step-by-step process of kind of publishing articles on the subject and then leveraging those into finding an agent and getting a book contract.
Oh, wow.
That was a long process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're running out of
Oh,
time.
Okay.
It's been fun, and you're
Yeah.
absolutely a wonderful guest, John.
Oh, thank you.
Love to have you
Thanks.
on the show to explore more about the Stonewall Strong and the Victory Deferred, and of course the hot stuff. I would love to chew your ear off about that one. But I want to ask you to wrap things up. Where can anybody get your book?
Well, all of my books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And Bank Square Books and Mystic, I know, has Stonewall Strong, and they did have Wilhelmina Goes Wandering in their local authors section.
Nice.
But definitely all of the online bookstores, you can get them there.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's jmandriote.com.
Okay. And that's all the time we have for tonight's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been Broad Mind. I am T.L. Rockowitz. Until then.